Shall we begin?
Yeah, sure.
Good evening, everybody, to yet another session of Talking Films Online. Today, we have Rutuja Deshmukh, who will be leading the discussion on the Battle of Algiers. Rutuja Deshmukh is currently a junior research fellow at Symbiosis International University, Pune. She is a visiting faculty of cinema at Savitribai Phule Pune University. Her research areas include popular cinema, popular cultures, and questions of gender and representation at the intersection of neoliberalism. Her work has previously appeared in the Feminist Review, The Wire, Fem Asia, Countercurrents, and Himal South Asian. She is the author of a book chapter, Film Viewing and Netflix, an inquiry into politics of the internet and visual pleasure, forthcoming from Palgrave. Another book chapter on food and women's issues during the pandemic is published by Harmattan Paris. She is also co-editing a book, Historicizing Myths in Contemporary India, which is forthcoming from Routledge, India. Welcome, Rutuja, and over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. So when I was asked to, I'm not audible, right?
Yes, you are.
So when I was asked to talk, I wanted to initiate a discussion on probably a more contemporary film, but eventually we decided on Battle of Algiers. And why Battle of Algiers, and why this film sort of holds questions or mirrors the contemporary situation is something interesting I found about the film when I started reading up a little more about the film after watching it, after having taught it in the class. The film was interestingly shown in Pentagon, for it offered lessons in the so-called war on terror. Which is very interesting, and the Americans, apparently there is this report in which one of the American generals says that the French lost strategically, and that is where we need to differ. So you see how the film is used for military conquest in that sense in contemporary times is what really interested me in looking at this film from a very different perspective altogether. Also, how do we take into account, if, as film studies people, as cinema studies people, do we take into account this kind of use of a film which otherwise is greeted as a masterpiece, a political cinema, it's inspiration to the diverse political groups? How do we look at this cinema is something that I will leave for the later discussion, of course. So talking about Battle of Algiers, it's definitely a birth of a nation film, sort of employing the melodramatic mode, but however more popularly known as the film's rhetorical use of realist and documentary tropes. The film itself was shot on this sort of grainy news. It has this grainy newsreel effect, deliberately used. Deliberately, Pontecoro has used degraded black and white film stock that gives that newsreel effect. And what is this realism of Pontecoro is also that one would want to look at. How is it accomplished by using the actual Kasbah locations in the film? I'm assuming that all of you have seen the film and continuing with my discussion here. So and and the residents and the cast of Kasbah is almost everyone is non-professional. Uh, this remains this sort of realism, which is uh, which comes from the tradition of the neorealist cinema, in the tradition of Rossellini and De Sica, which treated final months of World War II and looked forward to this democratic transition in Europe, in Italy in particular, uh, post their experience of fascism. Yeah. uh, but when we look at it, sort of continues with that tradition, definitely, with, as I had earlier said, the deliberate use of degraded black and white film, mimicry of that documentary effect to give the impression of as if we are viewing an evidence, a piece of history. And this sort of overarching tropes that are discussed while discussing the Battle of Algiers, is also somehow one more factor which comes into play is democratization of filmmaking itself. But the question is, whose democratization? Because democratization, I mean, the neorealism sort of is said to be the flag bearer of this democratization of film. So in Battle of Algiers, this sort of tradition is definitely taken forward, but the question is, whose democratization? And in that sense, Alan in conversation with Alan O'Leary, I would like to talk about Battle of Algiers also as the cinema which is the end of imperial cinema, end of the empire cinema, in that sense. A film that deals with European imperial project. And film scholars like Ben Ghiat show us how she questions this realism and overlap of documentary fiction that were also sort of key modes of fascist empire cinema, or to initiate a discourse around this as well. And while discussing uh, this cinema, it's very important to realize these remarkable tropes that are used, sort of, that are carried forward from neorealism, but have are dealing with the fascism of the imperial cinema also. The film deals with independent struggle of Algerians as against the French, as we all know. But in the overall achievement of independence, we will talk about the end epilogue or the coda sequence as it is as discussed. But the focus on it allows sort of uh, how the film uses how this speciality sort of is used in the film, the dichotomy between the European city and the Arab Kasbah, and the film's rhetorical employment of tropes of newsreel, of realist filmmaking, etc. And of course the soundtrack and uh, complex use of chronology, how the film goes back and forth in that sense. Um, in that sense, Battle of Algiers manages to tell the story of two foregrounded sort of characters, an Algerian, and in that sense, the Algerian and the French opponent, the Algerian this army officer and sorry, the French army officer and the Algerian rebel. But as it also features this uh, this supplementary sequence towards the end, uh, which is coda, or the epilogue to the main story, when the battle plot is seeded, and uh, there are protest riots on the screen, and against the occupation, and which is experienced by us, by the viewers, by the audience, as politically inspiring. um, the film's uh, the film has influenced later works, not necessarily ideologically inclined. If you see the Bourne films, the representation of torture in the film, like Zero Dark 30, uh, the tradition of Battle of Algiers sort of continues in these films. And at the same time, um, it manages to filter the techniques and the memory of uh, political and humanist filmmaking that predates this film. Uh, so coming back and talking about Battle of Algiers, it's a moving account of the early phase in the Algerian War of Independence. Um, and it's constantly has been in it's been constantly talked about in the sense of how the historical accuracy and how these black and white images and its dialogue of the French and the French colonizer and the Arab colonized are represented in these films, and also the most importantly, how the architecture or the spatial dichotomy in the film sort of pans out, a narrative sort of expedient whereby the tale of two cities, the French Quarter and the Arab Kasbah, sort of figure the relationship between the colonizer and the colonized, um, stressing upon what Franz Fanon would say, the colonial world cut into two. So moving towards this, I would like to talk about the end, the 6-minute coda to the battle, uh, which shows the street protests and confrontations between the soldiers and the police, and the journalists who are reporting them. Remember, we've already spoken about how it has a newsreel feeling right from the beginning. Uh, the film shows that protesters are attempting to move towards the European quarters, and this is they are attempting to leave the areas where they were forced to live in their zone, and moving into the European zone. This flow of Muslim Algerians from the areas allotted to them, this reverse flow in that sense, uh, can be seen both from the perspective of the film's opening title and later during the general strike, when French soldiers attempt to storm inside the Kasbah in imposing numbers, with weapons, with the military might. And in the end, this sort of flow is reprised, and the purpose, the Algerian crowd is sort of is the flow is reversed, and they are uh, sort of avenging this through architectural, spatial sort of quality, and you see these buildings which are constantly, the frames where you see the low angle looking at the prison, the prison buildings, and the same low angle is used when the crowds are dispersing and are sort of this reenactment of demonstration for the film takes place also in the real location between the Kasbah and the downtown European city, where the protests are encountered with police and army, and you hear a voiceover which talks about how it's like a reportage which goes on. And to look at this, I would like to point out at the urban history of Algiers itself, that clarify the significance of this location. How in 1920s the city had experienced inward migration on large scale, where the Muslim population grew in greater numbers, and how how this number was reduced over a period of time, and how this Muslim population was sort of pushed inside, and uh, uh, how the year, by the time in 1954, the year when the Algerian War for Independence begins, uh, what happens to this population inside, and how the chief architect employed by the French in the Algiers, in Algeria, builds this architecture of oppression, and uh, how that architecture, the prisons, the administrative buildings, sort of play a major role in this film, and how essential it becomes to understand the knowledge of this housing project, the colonial housing project, for a viewer of a Battle of Algiers in that sense. Uh, it is another very important sort of aspect of Gillo Pontecorvo's Battle of Algiers, uh, the most relevant film probably, that talks about terrorism in that sense, and anti-colonial resistance. How do we look at the film in the current sort of scenario? It is very clear that Pontecorvo sympathizes with the suffering of the Algerians, and in that sense, it's a true, it's a film that comes from this the Fanon's understanding of the colonized and the colonizer. One of the scenes that I can talk about right now is the how Battle of Algiers is permeating the role of violence within the colonial structure. It follows, therefore, some sort of how violence related sequence are panned out in the true, in that sense, a Fanonian spirit. uh, there's one scene in the film when Ali Lapointe, who's a street tramp at that point of time, he's not part of the resistance, is sort of intentionally tripped by a young French boy in the course of a police chase. Um, Instead of attempting to abscond from the scene, Ali rises to his feet and punches this man, and that scene sort of uh, uh, is what exactly Fanon's conception of anti-colonial violence would talk about, that psychological liberation from the colonized, uh, where Fanon uh, talks about the level at the level of individuals, how violence becomes sort of a cleansing force. It frees the native from this inferiority complex, from his uh, inaction in that sense, and makes the colonized fearless and restores sort of self-respect. Yeah. And this kind of this sort of keeps these moments in the film. For example, in the film starts with a torture scene where a tortured man is offered a cup of coffee, and is told that if you would have told us about, if you would have given this information, look, you wouldn't have had to suffer so much. And it just shows how this entire sequence invites the commentary on radicalization, and on how the political, in that sense, how is one politically baptized into a resistance. Yeah. Another very important aspect of Battle of Algiers is what intrigued me is the role of women. Yeah. How in the battle, the scene where the three women changing their clothes uh, in a room which is supposedly a place where they're getting ready for the attack, are applying makeup and putting on the wigs, etc. How this changing how the scene sort of directly follows a scene in which a group of Algerians are mourning the victims of a bombing by a French extremist group. However, as a first time viewer, one is not aware of how this dressing room scene where three women are getting dressed sort of relates to a vengeance, relates to a revenge that is going to pan out. Uh, and the scene progresses as the Algerian women are transformed to resemble the European women, and then they are revealed to a first time viewer as the members of FLN. And the veil, uh, that the veil and the politics of veil, and how French view Algerian women with veils, also comes sort of in here, where the process of unveiling allows uh, allows women to because the French view veiled women as the identity of Algerian women, as Arab women, as something exotic under that veil, as something that is as something uh, uh, something that is exotic, and of course this very oriental view of looking at the native women. As opposed to that, the process of unveiling in the battle allows women to play this indispensable role in the war, and also again, talking from Fanon's book, A Dying Colonialism, how it recounts the methods used by Algerian revolutionaries in their fight to dismantle French colonial oppression, where it is described the immense possibilities of women, unfortunately, uh, you know, uh, transformed into an inert, dehumanized object. And in the film, this woman sort of uh, is both literal, is literally, this women, Algerian women body is literally freed from that uh, from that shackle, that identity, that sort of image that is assigned to them in that sense. uh, in their Europeanized appearance, they play a critical role for the liberation. And that, to me, was something which sort of, and they travel to the middle of the city, uh, to place, not as suicide bombers, but just to place their bags at the places, like in the middle of a cafe, and in the middle, in the heart of the French Quarter, and leave, thereby doing their bit in this resistance, this of course violent resistance. I think at this point of time, I think I should stop and ask for more views, and probably uh, um, continue about, towards the end, maybe talk a little bit more about uh, uh, the architecture and the film, and how this Kasbah and European city sort of uh, posit themselves in that sense in this film.
Thank you very much, Rutuja, uh, for for your opening out of the film. Um, you have spoken about both the formal and the political aspects of the film, and it is now open for discussion. Anyone would like to begin with your questions, comments? Okay, while you gather your thoughts, Rutuja, I was wondering if this film could be seen within the broader frame of third cinema, because of its critique of neo-colonialism, and also its formal aspects, like you mentioned, the grainy feel of a documentary, and it actually presents the lived experience of the people. So it's like a journalistic rendering. So, so if we look at, towards third cinema, which was almost like a manifesto that was laid out by the Latin American filmmakers, Bolaños and Getino. So I was wondering whether, at least when I watched the film, I thought, it kind of lends itself to reading within through the lens of third cinema.
Definitely, most definitely it does. At the same time, one thing that kept coming to me again and again, and that is, I think it is also in one of the articles I read, there's a mention of this. Do we look at the film just as this borrowing or move taking forward, not exactly borrowing, because Pontecorvo comes from the same school of neorealism actually, but is it just about neorealism? Is it just about using a worn out black and white film to give that, all those known tropes of neorealism, or is it also employing a melodramatic mode to a political film while disguising it in that neorealist sort of trope of filmmaking, is something that I found extremely clever in that sense, positively clever in the film. I don't know, what would you think about it?
Uh, I don't know. When I said third cinema, I
Yeah.
thought of it. I mean, like as a critique of you know this neo-colonialism, more in that sense,
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
and not so much in maybe the generic mingling of melodrama and
Yeah.
neorealism, but more in terms of its politics. So from that point of view, I thought probably we could read it within the frame of third cinema.
Yes, I mean, it is quite like it's very openly a critique of that imperial project, and looks at I mean, the presentation of Colonel Matthew, for example, who has extreme, like, very prominent presence in the entire film, and especially the film's opening scene, set in that French army headquarters, where I spoke about it, where this Algerian who has clearly been tortured, but we don't see the torture, but we see this bent over figure in obvious pain, where the man cannot even stand by himself, and then the victim is offered a cup of coffee, and is told that it will make you feel better. Yeah. And then the question that, could you have talked sooner, something on those lines. Could you have, I don't remember the exact the dialogue, the subtitle there, but something on those lines, that couldn't you have talked probably sooner. And then another presentation of Colonel Matthew, when he enters Algeria, and there's this victory parade sort of introduction of the colonel, and he's someone who's fought the Nazis, and he's someone who's so in that sense, it's the critique, and it's looking at even looking at fascism from a different perspective, from a non-imperial perspective, in that sense, is what, in my opinion, also makes it this the third cinema, or comes from that sort of or point of view, where in that sense, what probably how Deleuze and Guattari would look at fascism, in that sense. No, I mean, something that comes from within. Maybe it would be interesting to also look at what happens to uh, post what happens post, though it's not a film studies debate definitely, but it would be interesting to look at what happens post liberation in Algeria.
Is anyone ready with his or her question or comment? Yeah, Nikhila?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Anki is raised hand. No, let her.
I can go after you, no worries. Please go ahead. I'll ask.
No, Auntie. No, I was just going to respond to, the kind of continue the conversation on third cinema that Geeta pointed out. In terms of it, let's say, being political cinema, addressing a kind of a political issue or raising political consciousness. I think it shares that aspect of third cinema. But Rutuja, since I don't know this film in terms of how it was, how it's been released, how it's been received, because generally one of the aspects of third cinema is also that it looks for parallel modes of distribution, exhibition, which is not mainstream, right? So this was something that was on my mind. But my own response, other than this aspect of third cinema, was it seemed to me, while as you rightly pointed out, one can read Fanon into the film, into the way in which the question of violence is dealt with in the film. What one finds, I found it quite amazing that the film does not either demonize or dehumanize either groups. There is this sense that there is a contingency, a political context in which these two adversaries are kind of set against each other, their aspirations clashing. So it seems to me like the film, even as it, as you said, as it takes this kind of documentary kind of route, it's not obviously that. But even as it takes that route, one of its functions is also to play these two as not as a kind of figure of evil versus figure of good kind of a thing. So I was wondering if the form also lends itself to the kind of representation of the personnel, who are ranged against each other in this situation. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yes, in that respect, I really found this the character of Colonel Matthew really serves that, because he's somebody who's successful in the end of Nazi domination in Europe, and at the same time has served the cause of French colonial domination in Madagascar, in Suez, Nigeria, etc. So and it is to me it's interesting to look at how at that point of time, probably around the same time when how Deleuze and Guattari were sort of describing fascism, and like this entire business of looking for evil, which you rightly point out that the film doesn't look for evil, but the film just presents what is in even the violent resistance, and at the same time the violent oppression. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Okay. I think
Yeah.
Anki would want to say something.
Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank you so much for such a lovely talk. It was not only just interesting and filled with lots of information, but it's also were very insightful. Especially, I really liked few anecdotes that you give, especially the how it was being screened in Pentagon, as well as but that particular anecdote actually opens up to lots of further questions. It definitely complicates the way we see into the from the post-colonial studies point of view, right? So yeah, that is I will definitely probe further into this particular
You know,
anecdote that you
I just found this out very recently, as in just 3 hours ago, actually, while just going through some papers again and looking for a few more articles, that it was re-released in US in 2004. And apparently, I mean, this could be this is, as you said, these are anecdotes, these are conspiracy theories, but it seems that the American intelligence had a big hand in re-releasing it, and a screening at Pentagon for the Iraq War recruits, which is which kind of opens up a very different discussion, as you said.
It's the existing dynamics about the West versus East, or Occident versus the Orient. It definitely does complicate the matter. Undoubtedly. Also, I teach a particular course in my university called City and Cinema. So your particular interesting anecdotes on and informations on the architecture and the cityscapes was really enlightening one. However, I have a little different opinion about or perceptions about how it was this Battle of Algiers being perceived as a neorealist film. I will tell that, yeah, undoubtedly it has several neorealistic influences, which is undeniable to ignore. You cannot ignore such anecdotes that is there. So for example, what you said, that non-professional actor, the location shoot, the docufiction type of the particular aspect. But my point is on this particular film, as well as I'm extending the point that Geeta ma'am and Nikhila ma'am has said, obviously being my teacher, she obviously said it before me. And yeah, I'm just extending what they have said, and into, as if obviously third cinema has come into the point, which is also part of my research area, that I think that there are certain neorealistic influences indeed present in Battle of Algiers, but these are purely limited into the form of cinematic language. I mean, the techniques of camera, edit, and sound. And not really into the ideological, domain of neorealism. I think the philosophy of neorealism and the philosophy of Battle of Algiers, as it is more as an, highly suggested by Geeta ma'am and Nikhila ma'am, that, has a very obvious third cinema influence into the entire predisposition and representation of Battle of Algiers, as well as the cinematic styles and aesthetics that has been used by Pontecorvo. But my point is that how the philosophy of both the films are definitely based on quite a different norms, because as third cinema, towards the third cinema essay rightly points to, that when it defines second cinema, that it is a cinema of petit bourgeois. As they are, kind of in a way unable to be the bourgeois itself, being the petit bourgeois, I am just having an alternative position on the points of production, distribution, exhibition system, and the ideological dispensation, which generally, if I say in a simpler manner or in a shorter form, that it kind of, goes opposed to the classical Hollywood cinema, and means that it just, defies the continuity system. Right on and you have rightly talked about the realism part, which is basically kind of contradicting with the classical Hollywood realism, which is represented through the continuity system. And neorealism has an ideological opposition against this continuity system.
Right.
But on the other hand, in my opinion, Battle of Algiers is more of a third cinema than a neorealist cinema, because neorealist cinema is definitely a second cinema because it is a petit bourgeois cinema. It is still, even when you are explaining, when you were explaining about neorealist part, you again started with Rossellini and Desica, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it is an auteur cinema, like a petit bourgeois cinema, especially a very much auteur cinema, which again, in a different manner, idolizes an individual. In classical Hollywood realism, we see this idealization is in the form of star. Here, it is in the form of auteur, but it is individual nonetheless. Right. In the day's end, it is, if you talk about politically, it is nonetheless individual. It is somewhere, instituted into idol worshipping or individual worshipping. Whereas the main premise of third cinema completely rests upon the people's cinema, which brings into the main point of a active audience versus a passive audience. I think Battle of Algiers is very much a particular film that is capable of, creating this passive audience, active audience. And that is the main important, and what I love about Battle of Algiers. It's one of my all-time favorite films, of course, because it just motivates you. It just makes you stirs up your emotions. You cannot be, unaffected by it. As simple as that. It has a very much ingrained visceral affect. That is what is possible when it is kind of establishes an active audience, right?
Yeah. True.
Now, I think this is the only way I see how Battle of Algiers may have a neorealistic influences, but it's limited to that instead of being a neorealist film, because the philosophy of both the films, when a neorealist film, be it Bicycle Thief, Germany Anno Zero, or Rome Open City, whatever you pick up, whichever one you pick up, it's something that, if you see that, their philosophy of it is something very, very different to Battle of Algiers. And it is much well expressed through the particular sequence that you also referred, which is undoubtedly not, you cannot miss it, that, the three women dressing up as a French to, kind of terrorize. And this particular moment is, I think, that is also opening up a dialogue and kind of questioning the audience directly, that the word terrorism is very much West constructed, a construct of a West.
Yeah.
But you are executing the entire idea of terrorism, and it is sanctioned when you take a French color. Again, it questions the very definition of terrorism. And this is the very, very interesting moment, I think, that Pontecorvo is able to create, when actually the truth slaps right into your heart. Let's see that it is always said that, third world, Islam is the root cause of terrorism, but it is only becoming sanctioned when you take a French color.
True.
So it does puts the question, directly to the audience. But nonetheless, I had found your particular talk very enlightening and quite insightful indeed. I learned a lot of things.
Thank you. No, in fact, I completely agree with you. In fact, I may have put myself not in a correct way, probably. But when I said that, the film comes from that tradition, comes from the neorealism tradition, but is not a neorealist film. It is a political cinema in that sense, but it borrows from that tradition and moves way ahead of that tradition. And in fact, I would say that it employs this melodramatic mode, which is not which was not part of neorealism anyway. Neorealism, humanist cinema, whereas this is melodramatic mode, using melodramatic mode, a political cinema. And in that sense, yes, very close to, in fact, third cinema, not just close, but you call it third cinema.
No, I just had one point to say. What I meant by is that it is even it is not even borrowing from neorealist tradition. I mean to say, because what I mean to say is that it can have an influence of, but what I meant that, you know, whatever influences or traditions you are talking about, they are all into the apparatus level, on the level of the cinematic techniques. What I mean by cinematic language, a language that is constructed by three elements: camera, edit, sound. So these cinematic tools, if you consider this as a cinematic tools, like on location shooting, docufiction, or the, you know, black and white, or the grainy image that you're talking about, or you know, these are also the language or tool of all the political cinema of the world. If you see the lineage of political cinema, starting from German expressionism or Soviet montage to all this, any of them have been employing several of these techniques. Even Dogme 95, as recent as 95, Dogme 95 or earlier, in Mexico, in Argentina, in Cuba, even in Iran. So this is also one way of expressing it is also a language. What I mean to say, that it is also the language of political cinema. If you study political cinema, then you will see this is also the standard language of political cinema. So I can only say this is a, you know, influence of neorealism rather than having a strong tradition followed, because it has very drastic, different representation styles than the neorealistic philosophy, as I said.
Any response to that, Rutuja, or should we take more comments, questions?
No, I'm open to more questions, comments, whatever.
Anyone else? Yes, Vijay, please go ahead. Vijay has unmuted.
He doesn't seem to have an audio connection. Vijay.
Okay, because I thought,
you know, someone can type out probably if there is any problem. We can like then.
Jayanto, would you like to say something? Sanjay?
Yeah, I'll just come in for a very short while. I just wanted to, in continuation with that thought of that anecdote about the film being played for the Pentagon vis-a-vis what the American army should do or American intelligence should do vis-a-vis Iraq. I'm reminded of what many revolutionary leaders, starting from Ho Chi Minh to Kwame Nkrumah to Jomo Kenyatta, they have all said in relation to the Indian independence struggle that you guys were lucky that you were colonized by the British and not by the French. I wonder what they meant when they said that, you know. So it is always to be assumed that there is, particularly in the Western world, there is this assumption that the French have been at it in a much more competent way than the British have vis-a-vis colonization, right? I have my own doubts about this theory, but it very much persists. Also, Algeria is something more than, it has become a kind of a symbol, you know, that for all anti-colonial struggles, you know, in fact, the one reason why this film has been such a landmark for it is quote unquote objectivity, as to how it doesn't demonize the oppressor and it doesn't present the oppressed as very pitiable and suffering characters. And this is one reason why the film is called the Battle of Algiers. The moment you call it the battle, it obviously, there is an assumption that it is a contest between two supposedly seemingly equal, entities. And that is how we see that there is no oppressing colonizer and there is no perpetually oppressed colonized. There is a difference in, I think somebody pointed out, in the audience participation. The audience positioning is a very, very important thing. And that is where this film differs from, I read somewhere, don't remember, I think someone, Robert Stam or someone, said that these films that have traditionally in the Western world dealt with an exotic other, and how Western civilization has had to struggle to overcome that wildness, is always through the circle of the viewfinder of the rifle. As in the American Western movies, here we have the audience sympathy is always with the little wagon which has the 4 or 5 white people with a few women, and they're surrounded by these Red Indians who are going round and round on horseback, and they would kill them unless the white people are able to heroically, protest them, kill them with guns. This is precisely what happens in a film like The Wild Geese, wherein the white mercenaries, although they are very clearly the mercenaries, they are shown as grand, noble creatures fighting some kind of, let us say, uncivilized hordes. Here it is more or less between equal. Here the violence has been shown from both sides, but it is very clear that this is the first time the leaning is definitely leftist. The leaning is definitely leftist, but it begins with the plotting against the Casbah where they plant the bombs, and there's a retaliatory action. So it is a tit for tat thing for everyone, and then it becomes successful. The battle does not really end in any conclusive manner. It is only 2-3 years wherein the seeds of revolution have been planted in the hearts and minds of people. It is only when the people, in masses come out on the streets with the women ululating, with the children, men, old people, they're all out on the streets, that finally it is believed that the French are convinced that it is time to leave now, and that they leave, And therefore, it is very aptly called the Battle of Algiers, wherein it is a contest between two seemingly more or less equal sides, but it is inconclusive. Also, the fact is that we have to take into account the fact that the film takes place in Algeria. Now, Algeria is something which is something much more than a scene of a contest between the colonizer and the colonized. And it is, of course, very, very rightly been praised for its objectivity. But as Fanon himself has said, that objectivity, quote unquote, always works against the colonized. Here, there is seemingly an equal distribution. This is, I think there's a comment somewhere. Okay, I'll just stop it here. And the fact that is that you cannot stop this film being discussed vis-a-vis post-colonial studies, as to how people like Derrida, how people like Helen, Sixu, even Kamu, their points of view are different, but they all, some Algeria means a lot of, a lot to them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jayantu. Sridhar, would you like to speak, or shall I read out your comment? Okay, there's a comment from Sridhar here. He says, very beautiful presentation. However, the discussion after the presentation made me put this query, put the question from reception side. Unlike other movies on Algerians, this particularly not banned by the state, but the movie did not perform well and faced censorship from other corners. I think this puts our discussion on style, content, and method is political rather than neo-realist or third movie. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think it was banned in. I mean, I do agree with what he says about where the discussion should be on style, content, and method that is political. But the film was banned in France for a long time, and it was shown on television only in the early 70s, I think. Till then, the French television did not show the film. And that explains a lot about it was a political film, and it definitely took a stand which did not go well with the popular opinion in France. And it also makes me remember another potential scene that could be discussed probably in the film, is when General Mathieu is giving a press conference, and he's asked about Sartre's opinion on Algerian war for liberation. And and that is the point when he has something to this effect. I can't exactly reproduce the dialogue, but something to the effect of Sartre can keep his opinions to himself, but how a war is won with might and not with the ideals and the principles. It's the same man who's talking, who's in the same breath talking about defeating fascism, and in the same breath talking about how a war is won with might and intelligence, and not all 400,000 Arabs are not our enemies, and we cannot basically we cannot kill them all. And this sort of resonates with the contemporary warfare too, which in the film he says that the warfare relies on intelligence. And when we talk of intelligence, of course the questions of surveillance and intelligence, and the state is watching you, which is the reality of today, reality of you and me. And how does this pan out? And then again, again and again I'm trying to take this discussion towards this, what exactly is fascism, and how do we look at is who is fascist? Some of the Deleuzian questions that we might want to ask.
Anyone else? Any more comments, questions?
Yeah, I'll just come in for a minute.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Geeta, this is again, if I remember the dialogue correctly from that Colonel Mathieu, he says that when the journalist asked him the question about, asked his comments about what Sartre has said, that we will win this war when the Sartres, they speak for us rather than against us, and it is therefore, it's very clear that public opinion is the main danger that the occupying French had, and when it became so overpowering in their own country, when the voices were raised against the French colonialism in Algeria, they had no other option but to leave.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jayanto. Anyone else? Arun, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would just, can I come in?
Yeah, Rajan, go ahead.
Yeah, with all that talk about Sartre and the reference to him, right? I think we also have to think about Camus' The Outsider, right? Which is in Algiers and it's about shooting Arabs and all those kind of things, right? And Sartre dies in Camus dies in 60, right? So yeah, that's before the liberation and all those things happen. That's it.
I'll like to address what Rajan had said just now. Can I, Geeta?
Please go.
Okay. This is about Camus, of course, and we find that in the novels of Camus, it is always, although the novel, I mean, his most famous novel, L'Étranger, or The Outsider, or The Stranger, whichever way you want to call it, he talks about there's always an Arab who is the other. And actually, his outsiderness is his own alienation, which is a very middle class phenomenon there. But I'm talking about other, what is called as the Pied Noir, the people of French origin who were born in Algeria. They've always have felt a sense of romance and, you know, belonging, out of which they were uprooted when they had to leave after Algerian independence. And this sense of nostalgia, this sense of longing or yearning for something which they had to leave behind, it permeates the world, you know, the works of people like Hélène Cixous. And she very clearly mentions that when I walk on the hot sands of this fragrant land, I know it belongs to the Arabs. But somehow I feel that all my pains, all my miseries are at rest. I'm just, you know, speaking from a very, very vague memory, that they're at rest when I'm in this country. So this love for the land is something which a film like this does not take into account. It does not talk about those people. It has two equal but opposite sides here, the rebels and the colonizer oppressors. But there may have been, you know, a whole lot of people within the French themselves who had sympathy for the rebel cause, for the Algerian cause, at least a love for the land. We must know that as late as 1970-75, there were more than 100,000 French people who were left in Algiers alone, you know. So that means that they wanted to live in spite of the political defeat that they had, you know. This is something which a film, however quote unquote objective it is, can never catch. That can there be only two sides? That is the question which needs to be addressed.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jayanto.
May I
Yes.
come in?
Yeah, Sridhar, yes. Please.
See, I was trying to grapple my ideas because, now Dasgupta sir has put it rightly. See, we are seeing it from the maker and the other. But the maker actually tried to produce this, make this movie in a documentary style, deliberately. See dates and events, everything he describes and projects. This makes very dangerous trend, because that's why it is not banned. You can please cross-check your references. It is not banned by French government at all. This movie is not banned, but it could not perform well because the immediately making of this movie, student movement started. the French student movement, and wherever it is screened, Odeon Theatre, I think. It was every show, the windows were broken, and it did not make any money, but though they relayed it in TV, there is not much reception. So that makes the very dreaded agenda behind this movie. Political purpose, I'm saying, making is beautiful. That film, as if we are really witnessing the events in a archaeological footage, archival footage. But it is not true. He recreated it. Everything he recreated. So, that makes that brings me one aspect of the present Maoists are as well CPIML, Naxalites, also known as Naxalites, when Balgopal, one of the human rights activists from Hyderabad, who wrote a book-length essay called Chikati Konalu, means, how do you say?
Dark corners.
I cannot translate. I am afraid translation may kill the essence. So, like that. So, shades up, like sir was putting before me, and different shades. So, when this was written, you know who are the buyers of that book? When the first edition and second edition, it is entire police department. To circulate the, they believe that if they circulate this among the people, they can know that how Naxalites are cruel. Mistake is lies with them. But purpose of the essay, his whole political project is not that. But it was used in such a way. But as if it's a legitimation for state. So, Balgopal one cannot expect at all. So, but that was so. I saw in this movie, director has that agenda. That's why I felt afraid. So it's a dangerous movie than a neo-realist or something. No positive potential, but it is dangerous game, I believe. So, maybe you can better analyze it, but I feel that it's a deliberate orchestration to show the guerrilla force as equal with the state force, which is not. So, and their way of murdering them, and it is finally how much the casualties, if you see, it is not the thing, it's all construction. This movie. So from that, but whatever apolitical you want to see, it is not apolitical. It's a sheer political movie, but it is not received and it is banned by not by government, by the people, military. Military doesn't want this movie. It sent the warnings to the theaters and the film authorities. So you can cross-check those things because lots of literature is there on this movie. You can build a library. That much is there.
Thank you, Sridhar. Rutuja, would you like to respond?
No, thank you. I mean, I think
mine is only comment. I liked her presentation, initial presentation, really well.
thank you. Thank you.
Any more comments, responses? Sanjay, would you like to say something? Tarkeshwar. Yeah, Sridhar, please go ahead. Sridhar, you have unmuted.
No, I'm done. I muted my mic.
Okay, okay.
Uh,
Yeah, Rajesh, please go.
Yeah, can I say something? Or you want to say something? Yeah, you say it, and I'll say what.
no, please go ahead first and then I'll.
No, I'm going back to my own point, and the question is when we talk about the Battle of Algiers, I don't know how relevant this is, but from Augustin of Hippo to Jean Rossier, or I don't know how it's pronounced, right? Yeah, you have Derrida, you have Camus, you have all these people born in Algiers, right? So when we talk about this film, The Battle for Algiers, right? It actually is what exactly is happening there, because there are some sites which call these people Algerian philosophers, right? And so much of Western philosophy is over here, and that goes back to Augustine of Hippo, right? So that's a very interesting thing. And when it actually comes to the kind of a fight, yeah, and we actually see something else happening. It's not the philosophy which happens, and that's why the Sartre reference is very interesting, because these people are actually born there, and like Jayanta said, they have this feeling of it being ours, right? Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if I'm sorry, I haven't articulated the point well at all, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you. I think in the end, may I?
Yeah, please.
Raman, yeah, in the end, I would just like to emphasize on one thing again, which probably I think I did not do enough. And I think me and Anki had a brief conversation about it, is about the architecture, of the colonial architecture itself in the film, which really, really interested me. And this one particular building where the final coda is shot, the final epilogue, when the street protesters are out, and there is this particular 200 columns building, which is the edifice of colonial architecture. And the way the camera looks at the building from from a low angle, looking at this entire crowd, and the building forms the backdrop of the Algerian people's struggle, and the people have like taken over the street completely, taken over that that street where this building stands, pushing the tank. And the scene plays out sort of, so instead of looking at it, instead of giving us an aerial shot, it gives us a shot from it plays out instead from the near bottom of the massive steps of this building. And the camera sort of looks up at this huge structure, and rather than looking down at the demonstrators in that sense. And that sort of lens, that cinematic language of resistance, which of course is not something that is coming from neorealism. It might be, as I would like to agree with Anki here, actually, that it may not, it might be just an inspiration from there, not even the continuation, but it employs quite unabashedly this melodramatic mode of political cinema, to me. Yes, that's it, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Any more? Also, I think what is interesting is the way it resonates for present day reality. Those that
the segregation of space, the kasbah and the space where the French officers are set. And the barbed wire, is some kind of, it is so chilling, because it actually reminds you of certain parts of our own country, which
Absolutely.
operate exactly like that. So, so I think what is very interesting about the film is even though it was made in, 66, it still resonates so much, and so much of what is shown in the film seems to remain unchanged, to this day. Like, it's a kind of repetition of those kind of scenarios even in this day.
True, true, absolutely. I mean, it resonates with Palestine, it resonates with Kashmir. It's very much there, and you see the similar, since it has that, the film also has the newsreel feel to it, and when you see these images, that is what you're reminded of in many ways, and also all other sort of ghettoized filmic representations in that sense, even like in the beginning when we were talking of Malik.
Yes. Yes, Sarkeshwar, you have 1 minute.
Am I audible?
Yes, please go on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rutuja, for suggesting this film and the initial remarks on the film for the discussion. I think the discussion went on well in two parallel ways, I think. One was about the genre of the film, or the type of the film. So the discussion went on that, and the other one was about the reception. So how it was received in France and in elsewhere, and by the Pentagon. So, and then even we were talking about how it resonates with the present condition now, things like that. So in earlier discussions, we had this kind of discussion about the kind of resistance reader or viewer who doesn't take up the subject position offered by the film as such.
Right.
So here I think not only a resistance reader, but also we have picky viewers. We pick up what we want from the film, irrespective of what genre type it belongs to, what is the structure of the film and things like that.
Right.
So in that sense, I was trying to reflect on uh, my own impressions while watching the movie. One I read somewhere else that it was based on a book written by one of the leaders of the movement. So I don't know how far it is true, and I have not read the book. So if the book is there, and then comparing the book with the film could be one of the ways to further make sense of the film or the difference between the film and the movement. And the second point that I was trying to make about its own impact on me. While watching the in the initial stages, I thought it was critical of the Algerian fighters uh, because they are involved in violence until when the police start planting the bomb. So that's when there's a turn that you start seeing the violence is actually perpetuated by the colonizer too. And then the Colonel Matthews views about the colony, about this battle, how to contain it, comes out very clearly than the colonial state itself. So colonial state in that sense is obvious. Though the colonel presents his views and plan to the administrators, they approve of it, they ask him, but their views are not focused on. So it became somewhere else, somewhere a kind of the top rung of the movement versus this colonel and his army. So in that sense, it becomes a kind of epic battle with no good or bad things. But the way, as you pointed out, the epilogue, the coda, tries to place it in the context of the Algerian independence. So in that sense, there is a slight tilt towards it, but otherwise, it tries to balance both sides. Looking at, yes, colonialism is there. As you said, the camera angles, those buildings, and this Kasbah area, it is all there in the background. But the narrative per se uh, doesn't focus on that.
Hmm.
So why independence is needed? There is no explanation to that. As even Dasgupta pointed out, uh, there might be Algerians who were born in Algeria who might be rooting for Algeria's independence, but there is no scope for that. It becomes only this movement versus that kernel kind of thing in the entire movie. And of course, we can pick up what we want and from the movie, and then attribute meanings to it, and then make our own uh, learn our own lessons for the present. Thank you.
True, true. Also, I mean, there have been some serious critiques of the film, which I probably chose not to mention here. But there's as I mentioned, the brief mention of Sartre. The film takes no account, sort of, in the with the ideological ties between. The FLN and the French left, a certain section of French left at least. Also, another thing is, there's been a critique of the film on the how the class difference within the liberation struggle never is pointed out in the film. uh, it's considered like we don't see any class difference between and we all know from the nationalist struggles that nationalist struggles cannot be as simplistic, just one sort of we can tell that from our own nationalist struggle in that sense. But yes, these are the larger questions which probably were not part of this discussion.
I think one more point I just wanted to point out was why I said the book, if it is based on the book, comparing the book
It is
and
based on, yes, it is
comparing
on,
the two would be important, because
right.
in this film, Ali becomes the focal point,
Hmm, hmm,
who is uneducated, who doesn't know about anything about colonialism, anything about freedom. So he's only a kind of a criminal who goes to a jail, and from there he becomes a kind of uh, a quote unquote freedom fighter,
hmm,
and it ends with him.
hmm,
So in that sense, it's story of a kind of criminal. Leave out the coda or the epilogue. So he's a kind of a mercenary. It looks like that. Otherwise, there's no justification. Even is watching that fellow uh, being hanged in the jail is the only one incident which is an indication that he might have become a kind of a part of the movement.
right.
Otherwise, there is no indication how he came to the movement
Hmm.
from being a criminal. So, in that sense, that is also very important. Why it begins with uh, this character and ends with that character, uh, because that character structures the entire narrative. So, in that sense, even though there are other leaders of the movement, they are not so focused as much as this Ali Pond.
Right.
Any more comments? Anvita, Shaila, Sanjay. Okay. Okay. In that case, we'll bring this session to a close. Thank you very much, Rutuja.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you all for
Thank you for the nice presentation.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rutuja. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you
night.
so much.
A wonderful
Thank you.
Good
presentation.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rutuja.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
Bye.
you. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Auntie. Bye. Bye.
time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Good
Thank you.
Good
night.
night.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.